I can continue letting people in. So my name is Amy Weber, and I am here with Anna Goldstein. I am a licensed clinical social worker. Anna is an occupational therapist, and we are two of the therapists who work at Speak, Learn, and Play. Jen Volpe, who is the co-founder of Speak, Learn, and Play with me, is on an airplane coming back to New York right now, so she's not with us today. But we offer individual counseling, occupational therapy, speech therapy, writing and reading support, social skills groups. We have a camp in the summer. So lots of things going on here. Um, so today we are going to talk about emotional regulation and physical regulation from each of our perspectives. I'm going to let Anna start with physical regulation. Then I'll talk about emotional regulation, and then we will have lots of time for questions.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Amy. So when we when we think of physical regulation, at least from an OT perspective, we really think about sensory processing. Because the ability of our bodies to feel physically regulated really depends on the input it receives through its sensory systems. So like I said, this concept is known as sensory processing, and this might be a term that some of you might be familiar with. Sensory processing disorder has become like a buzzword, and it's a common diagnosis for many neurodivergent children. So it's formally defined as how a person uses his or her senses to take in information from the environment, organize the information, and then generate an appropriate response. And so we have 7 sets of systems within our bodies. Many you are familiar with, such as the gustatory system, sense of taste, tactile, touch, auditory, hearing, visual, which is sight, but also processing of movement and depth within the environment. Olfactory is sense of smell, and then some ones that you might not be familiar with, which are vestibular, sense of movement in space, which affects balance. And the vestibular receptors are in the inner ear. And so sometimes someone's vestibular system is very sensitive and they might be motion sick in the car, for instance. And then the last one is the proprioceptive sensory system, which is the input that we get through our muscles and joints, and they provide us with an internal body map. And children may seek or avoid these types of input. So when we talk about dysregulation, when a child's feeling dysregulated, their sensory systems, when a child's feeling regulated, their sensory systems are well integrated, preparing them to interact and engage functionally with their environment. And it's like a well-oiled machine. When a child is in a state of what we call low arousal, this means they're under-responsive to environmental stimuli. They may appear sluggish, sleepy, spaced out, kind of missing what's going on around them. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum is what we call a high arousal state. This means they're over responsive to environmental stimuli. They may appear agitated, uncomfortable, out of control, maybe a picky eater or not wanting to wear certain textures. And then the term dysregulated applies to both arousal states, and it's a result of the poorly integrated sensory systems generating responses that affect learning and engaging in one's environment. And so we know that children with autism spectrum disorder and ADHD naturally might have a harder time regulating themselves, sort of coordinating all the input they're getting from their environment, processing it, and then interacting with their environment. So what can we do to sort of regulate these arousal states. So some strategies to help a low arousal state include unpredictable fast movements. So rotation on a swing, jumping, spinning, running, obstacle courses, strong smells such as peppermint essential oil, cold or strong flavors like ice pops or sour candy. And then on the other end of the spectrum, strategies to help our high arousal kiddos, predictable slow movements, rocking in a rocking chair, linear swinging, like on a park swing in one direction, body squeezes, what we call heavy work, which is like moving furniture, carrying heavy objects, pushing a laundry bin, wheelbarrow walks, crab walks, any of those animal walks are great. Yoga, swimming, intense aerobic activity, or anything that's really resistive. Weighted compression vests, if you've seen those. Deep breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, chewing gum, or a warm bath. And then something that we use often in the field are sensory diets, if you've heard this term, which is essentially a movement plan. They're customized activity plans designed to help keep your child in this optimal regulated state throughout the day, ideally preventing a state of dysregulation. So they should ideally be performed consistently throughout the day, like every hour. And it's sort of like a prophylactic treatment. Like we're kind of giving this input throughout the day to sort of prevent dysregulation. And they're created with the limitations of school and home environments in mind. They usually involve an alerting activity followed by a calming activity. For example, jumping on the trampoline for 1 minute and then push a box across the floor down the hallway. And then there would be like multiple activities like this. And then I wanted to share my screen just to show you some visuals of school sensory tools. Okay. Just a little bigger. So some school sensory tool recommendations. Non-distracting fidget toys. This is a good one for the desk. Wobble cushions on a chair. Ball chairs, which can be alerting. They like give really good vestibular input because you're moving your body up and down. And then bouncy bands under the feet on a chair that could give your muscles and joints some good proprioceptive input. And then a few home sensory tool recommendations. I really like creating a calming corner or a tent with pillows and dim lights, a place to really help our high arousal kids who need something to help calm them down. These Peapod body seats are really awesome. They provide proprioceptive input. It's like a big hug. A weighted lap pad or blanket. And there are so many other sensory tools, but these are just some of my favorites. And then if your child is having a hard time regulating themselves throughout the school day, you might want to bring it up to your child's teacher and ask if there are opportunities for movement breaks throughout the day. And then if you're at home and you know that a certain activity's environment dysregulates your child, you can sort of preemptively prepare their bodies by engaging them in movement for a high arousal state. So for example, in preparation for dinner time, which they might have trouble sitting still during, you can offer them a choice to crab walk or wheelbarrow walk down the hallway to the kitchen. You can have them carry heavy plates if that's appropriate to the table, push a full laundry basket down the hallway. These resistive weight-bearing activities give the body's proprioceptive system calming, regulating input. So I know this was a lot of information, but just a final takeaway to help you remember which activities help each state of arousal. A simple way to think of it is erratic stimulating activities help wake up a child in a low arousal state, and then heavy work, predictable, slower movements for a child in an already high arousal state. I'm going to hand it over to Amy now, but if you have questions, we will answer them at the end. So just hold on to those.
Thank you, Anna. I did not realize that a sensory diet is supposed to be done ideally once every hour. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So I am going to talk about emotional regulation, and that I would say is like the number one thing that parents call me about, right? When they want their kid to be in individual therapy, they're calling because they say that their child doesn't know how to self-regulate. They're having big meltdowns. They can't calm themselves down afterwards, and this is their I would say the number one concern for why a parent might reach out. So we have to think about what is emotional regulation. And emotional regulation, um, before we get there, our nervous system has an accelerator and a brake. And if any of you are neuroscientists, I will apologize. This is going to be completely oversimplified. But our nervous system, all humans' nervous systems, have an accelerator and a brake. And regulation means that the accelerator and the brake of our autonomic nervous system are in balance, and that there's an ability to monitor that energy and arousal and change it if necessary. Um, so Emotional regulation then means that the accelerator and the brake of our nervous system are balancing our emotions. We're absolutely still feeling all of our feelings. We're just trying to feel our feelings without too much accelerator, which would lead to meltdowns, or too much brake, which means like bottling up your feelings or like literally just collapsing. Regulated does not mean calm. And I think those two words get conflated often, but regulation does not equal calm. Um, Children learn to regulate their emotions through co-regulation. And put simply, co-regulation means that two people are coming together and one of them is regulated. Hopefully it's the adult is regulated. Um, the regulated person then shares their regulated state with the dysregulated person. And to give you an example, this morning, I went to the dentist, and that's an anxiety provoking time. My energy and arousal were up. My accelerator was, I wasn't having a meltdown, but I was anxious. My knee was shaking. I was, feeling jittery. And the hygienist came in and she was so regulated and so, like just talking to me in a very melodic, soothing way. And she was sharing her regulation with me. If she had come in and said, open your mouth, and started barking directions at me, my accelerator would have gone through the roof and I would have had a meltdown. So instead, her ability to stay nice and regulated helped me bring a little bit of break in, and I was able to sit in the chair and follow her directions calmly. Kids need to be regulated to be able to learn. That nobody is learning anything if they're not in balance. So how do you co-regulate? What does that look like? Number one is decrease the distance. You cannot offer co-regulation from another room, um, or even from across the same room. The closer you are to your child, the easier it is to offer co-regulation. Um, you have to check in with yourself. How are you feeling? Is the emotion that your child does the emotion that your child is expressing feel safe to you? Sometimes we don't feel safe when anger is expressed, even if it's being expressed in a, hey, you really annoyed me just then. There's nothing particularly unsafe or threatening about that, but it can stir up our accelerators. Um, so we have to kind of check in and say, do I feel safe with this feeling right now, or is this feeling not safe to me? You cannot offer co-regulation if you are feeling overwhelmed or dysregulated yourself. So many things are not a 911 emergency. And if you can't offer co-regulation in that moment, you can take a few minutes and regulate yourself before coming back to your child and decreasing the distance, and then offering co-regulation at that point. Um, the next step would be to validate your child's experience using the same level of energy. So that might look like, you are so angry. It's time to turn off the video games and you really didn't want to. Oh, or saying, you're feeling pretty sad and lonely. Everyone is going to that party except you, while lying next to your child and maybe whispering. So it's, you're not joining their dysregulation. You're just trying to match their energy and let them know that you get it. You really understand how they're feeling. And the last thing is to stick with it. Um, if you've ever soothed a baby, you know that there is not a straight line from upset to happy. It's a little bit of a dance. So your child does something and you react, and then your child responds to that reaction, and you respond to that reaction. And it takes some time to get into a rhythm with each other. Um, Two questions that I like to think of when I'm getting ready to offer some regulation to a child is, what do I want to model for this child in this moment? Um, and am I bringing us closer together with my words and actions, or further apart? And nobody is perfect at this. There are times when I say things that I'm like, oh, ow, why on earth? Of course that didn't bring the calm that I was wanting. And I was frustrated and I wasn't regulated. And there's an opportunity there for repair. And I go back and apologize and say, hey, that's not what I meant to say. I'm really sorry about that. And next time I'm going to try and take a deep breath before I speak. Or, next time I'm going to take a sip of water. But I think, anytime that I can check in with myself and think, are the next words out of my mouth bringing us closer together and on the same team, or are they going to move us further apart? That is a time that I'm going to have a win. So with that, we can open it up to your questions.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Kieran. My son Declan has ADHD combined inattentive and hyperactive. And we just recently had our parent-teacher conferences. He has some sensory accommodations at school. He has a bumpy seat. I think he uses a weighted lap blanket, but that maybe just once in a while. And headphones if he's distracted. What the teachers mentioned was that the movement breaks that they give him that were really helpful in the fall, all of a sudden are not helpful and are just amping him up further. So I wondered, Anna, like when the movement breaks are giving the opposite effect, then what's next?
Yeah. Well, sometimes, it's important to keep it fresh and change it up. A lot of times kids can sort of build up a tolerance to certain input and then it no longer is effective. Um, do you have any idea what some of the activities are?
I don't really. I know one day when it was very acute, the teacher took him and a friend to run up and down the stairs of school.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I'm guessing it's mostly like, something out in the hallway, something like that. That's what I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm. Well, like a lot of the running and jumping is usually kind of dysregulating. because it's like very alerting for the vestibular system. So I would suggest more like resistive weight-bearing movements, like those animal walks, wheelbarrow walks. I don't know how old your child is, but anything that's sort of like resistive and weight-bearing, just to like really give a calming input to the muscles and joints is usually what I recommend, rather than like running, jumping, spinning. Those are usually really dysregulating. Um, um, but it's important to change it up also, but and to sort of keep it, a clear start and a clear end. Like here's two spots on the floor. We're just gonna do wheelbarrow walks from the red spot to the blue spot 2 times, and then, like have a plan, have a schedule. I, would be happy to help. If you want to email me, I can give you some more specific exercises or activities, but overall, any of those like animal walks and weight bearing resistive things are really great. My pleasure.
Jen, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. Hey, everybody. Sorry, I know I'm not faceless in here. Don't mind my mess of a background. Thanks for taking the time to do this. My son, I'm recently a mom of a diagnosed level 1 ASD 4-year-old. And one thing, social emotional is his main challenge. One thing I'm noticing is that he doesn't seem to have any problem with physical space when it's family. But if I take him to a playground, there's this immediate sense of that person's pushing me, that person's behind me. And he really wants to go and he wants to play, but he gets very uncomfortable when there are kids who are too close to him. Do you have any recommendations, considering that he really wants to be there, how to make it a little easier for him?
Yeah, well, so when he's at home, he's not bothered by others in his space, but it's sort of like unfamiliar, strange kids if they're too close, that sort of thing. Okay. Um, well, I would start by working on like general body awareness activities. A lot of like obstacle courses that you can do around the house can help with body awareness. Maybe he's perhaps a little bit hypersensitive to his environment. Maybe like, are kids really too close all the time, or is it something that he's a little bit hypersensitive to?
My perspective is the kids are crawling over each other and there's a real sense of like, we are all here and it's chaos. So I don't necessarily think it's too close, but he certainly doesn't feel great about it. So, maybe, that's feedback for us, but I also wonder if there are ways for him to feel a little better in those
Yeah.
moments.
So I think like working on body awareness activities such as to sort of like desensitize this like heightened arousal state. A lot of those like high arousal activities that I mentioned, and similar to what I just mentioned to Kieran, are like animal walks, any sort of compressive or weighted tools to have at home or at school, any like obstacle course around the house where he has to build up a sense of body awareness, um, any sort of like heavy work activities like pushing or pulling things that are weighted, because that really gives the body a more accurate sense of where the limbs are in space, and that could be helpful to sort of bring this heightened arousal state down. But I would also just have just an open conversation with him and say, like, when we go to the park, it may seem like friends or other kids are in your space, but that's okay. Like, that's how kids like to play sometimes. You know, you can tell people, you can move your body away, or you can tell people, ooh, you're too close to me, you're in my space. Just like encouraging him to kind of advocate for himself and to sort of move his body away from an uncomfortable situation. I think that's really an important thing to teach a kid when they're young.
That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I would say definitely it's never too soon to start talking about boundaries and what feels good to our bodies. And he might need you to be a little closer on the playground. So that, you know, when he's starting to feel uncomfortable, you know, you can help say, oh, wait, that was a little too close. Why don't we move over here? You know, kind of modeling for him. But yeah, I wish I had learned boundaries when I was 4.
I like never leave him on the I mean, I'm
Yeah,
glued to him because I'm also he will hit if he feels threatened. So
yeah.
that is one thing I almost feel like I need to give him a little bit less so that he irons out a little bit of this himself. That's what I've been working with recently. But yeah, I think you're right. It is important that they understand that they don't have to have their bodies touched if they don't want to, certainly. But it's like how much of this, I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out threat detection of like, these are all kids who you're going to be playing with for the next 8 years of your life. And like, how do we, I don't know. So that's super helpful to just have maybe some conversations with him and to give him some exercises to understand his body more. So thank you for that.
Dominique, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just jumping in with Anna, and hi Kieran, how are you? I see some 372 folks on here. So you know, my son is in third grade, and so it was really helpful to hear that yeah, getting a movement break, because I have actually no idea what they do for my son when he needs a movement break, and knowing that that can maybe cause more harm if he's just running down the hallway is like super helpful information. But you know, Jager, my son, he only gets OT now. I think it's like once a month because the school IP feels like he doesn't need it. But I see a space for definitely at home before dinner to do some exercises to calm him down, because you know he's ADHD and he's, I guess you would consider level 1 ASD as well, but he was diagnosed last summer. And so there's certain times of the day where he's definitely falling apart and it's hard to keep him together, and I know that's happening at school sometimes. And so the wheelbarrow in particular, I remember this from when he started OT when he was 3. So I remember this, but I remember you needing someone to hold your feet. So I'm just wondering, what are actual realistic things that they could do in the hallway where it doesn't require a teacher holding, you know, a 9-year-old's feet all the way down the hallway? Because I just in reality don't think they're going to do that. So I guess I'm just trying to think of like in the school scenario, if there were like 2 or 3 things they could do without the assistance of a teacher, what would those look like?
I would say crab walks,
Mm-hmm.
bear crawls,
Okay.
um, or crab walks, bear crawls, donkey kicks, um, and I would consider maybe sending him into school with a body sock. Do you know what that is?
No.
A body sock, let me just pull up a picture. And this is something maybe you can have him take to school, but then bring home and do before dinner. I'll share my screen. There's so many tools out there, but it's like a full body like
Oh,
resistance band. And he can like sort of do like monster walks, keep his hands out far, keep his legs out wide, and sort of do monster walks down the hallway that gives like intense proprioceptive input to the whole body. It could be really regulating.
yeah, I definitely think he would do that at home, but like Karen was saying, there's no way he would wear it at school.
mm,
Um, in third grade 9, but I think some of the if the whoever the teacher is taking them out of the hallway, if we we can always email some examples. I mean, maybe if he's by himself with a teacher out there, then I'm sure he would do. I'm just thinking that they are so aware now at this age of what their friends think of them
Oh,
and
yeah.
people watching them. So I'm trying to think of something like, I
Mhm.
think that pushing something heavy could be good down the hallway, because that doesn't seem embarrassing. If someone walked out of the classroom and saw him doing a crab walk, I can only speak for my son. Um at school anyway. Just in that moment, like if
Mhm.
he goes into an OT room with his occupational therapist, that's a different story. But like if the teacher pulls him out for a movement break, I feel like he's going to do what he is not going to be embarrassed about doing, which could be pushing something heavy. So I think I
Yeah.
just have to think a little bit about, maybe even ask the teachers what that could look like.
Yeah, or maybe he can have like a class job where he is, carrying a heavy crate and collecting people's papers or folders in the morning, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
If he goes
It just,
out with a friend, they could hold each other's feet.
that's
It
true.
doesn't have
That's
to
a
be
good idea. Yep.
it doesn't have to be the teacher necessarily.
Yeah. Okay.
And that would be regulating for both kids, yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you. I'm just trying to practically put it into place in my mind. And
Yeah.
when Karen brought that up, I was like, oh, right. Like running down the hallway, like letting out all your energy isn't necessarily going to bring you back in calmer.
Yeah. It's also sort of like disorganizing and unstructured. I feel like
Yep.
the smaller the space, a clear expectation is more effective than like, I don't know when this is gonna stop, let's run all over, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's a piece of the playground situation too. The playground, it's, having such a big open space can feel completely overwhelming, and overstimulating.
Totally.
I have a regulation question.
Yes.
Yep. So I have a almost 5-year-old. Oh my gosh. Whose low support needs ASD, and he's been doing a lot of both like yelling and throwing things kind of in concert. So this whole me not being triggered, the throwing things really triggers me. And so I wrote down, right, when you were talking about matching their energy. So just trying to think about the kind of validating the anger, because there's definitely kind of like, watch me, I'm about to do this thing that I know is going to tick you off. Do you have any, aside from taking a walk away? Yeah, great. I'm getting some validation in the chat. Anything just about holding it, I try to think about moving him like under his bed. It kind of has like a tent situation, trying to kind of close in, but then I don't know if that moves him immediately kind of away from matching his arousal level, right, with my voice. I'm just trying to think about blending those two things in the moment. Because that's what we've been. And again, at school, they're like, wow, he's never like this. So he holds it, all together at school, and the welcome environment for everything to kind of come out at home, which I'm try to remember is a good thing. But yeah, anything you can share just about how to approach kind of that double whammy.
Yeah. So if you can catch it before it leaves his hand and heads across whatever the item is that he's about to throw, I will sometimes catch kids' hands, not in a really aggressive way, but just, oh my gosh, you are so mad right now and you want to throw something. Um, and what could he throw? What would be safe to throw in that moment, if anything? Or let's stomp our feet, or let's pound on the couch cushions, or whatever you can think of that will be active to release that anger, because that's what he's looking for. is a release, a physical release. So, and a lot of times I will have parents practice. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to practice being angry, not just for you, but for the kid. Like, okay, we're going to have 2 minutes where we are just going to have our anger practice, and we're going to pound on the couch cushions, or we're going to stomp our feet, or we're going to go outside and scream at the top of our lungs, or whatever. But practicing those things when you're not angry will make it easier to do them when you are angry.
Got it. We'll work on that.
But maybe, I mean, like, kind of catching him, acknowledging, labeling the feeling, letting him know that you see how angry he is, nothing is working out for him, whatever, he's very, very frustrated. I would label all of that. And you can even label that while having him go to his little tent in his room or under, wherever. Like, you can kind of label that while heading to a more down-regulating activity.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody else have questions?
Can I ask
Yes,
something?
of
Hi.
course.
Another 372 person here. So I, in terms of the co-regulation, I have my older son is 8 and has ADHD, and my younger son is 6, and he hasn't been diagnosed, but he has some of the buzzwords, either some sort of processing or the what's it called? He's not the active version, but sort of like like he zones out, and I don't know what
Low arousal.
Low arousal. Thank you. So I'm dealing with them triggering each other. So it's like I'm co-regulating. I'm trying to deal with myself, and then there's this one that brings that thing, and that one brings the other one, and there's sort of like this wild dynamic. So, and in some cases they're both wrong, and in other cases neither real. It's sort of, do you have any, sorry, this is not a very clear question. Do you have any suggestions with dealing with sibling rivalry when both kids have some sort of regulation issues, plus they're just kids?
Right.
But,
right.
yeah.
And they have opposite needs, yeah. Right?
Perfect.
One is totally low arousal and wants everything probably to be very quiet and, and slow. And then the other one is like, let's mix it up, which is a challenge.
And the slow one though does get a little physical because he's not as verbal, he's not as articulate as my older one. So sometimes he'll just, he'll like, try to squeeze him, and my older one doesn't do anything. So that's sort of how he uses his control. I don't know. So sorry. I'll let you.
No. So in those moments, you kind of have to pick and choose, right? You can't co-regulate everybody. You can absolutely regulate yourself and then go in and say, whoa, we have a big problem here. And then just sort of label whatever it is that you're seeing. And see if that will start to bring the temperature down a little bit. And then do some problem solving. Like, this is a problem. You want to do it this way. You want to do it that way. You squeezed him. He didn't like that. Whatever. I wouldn't label it, or I wouldn't judge it. It's like everybody is doing whatever they're doing, and you're just going to label it just like you're seeing it. And how are we going to solve this problem? And see if they can start to generate some ideas. Because there are things that they each can do. If one is bothering the other one could leave and stop stop being bothered. Even if they share a room, I'm assuming that one could close the door and have some privacy while the other one stays in a different room. So I would really advocate for them, or model for them how to problem solve together, and how to start communicating needs and preferences. I mean, it's
Great.
not going to be 100% all of the time they're going to get it right, but I think if you can start to model that for them.
So like in these cases, sometimes I do feel like they just need a separation, but their memory is so short that I wonder if, coming back to it after the fact, is it as relevant? And then also there's the problem of, over talking and over explaining in the moment with kids. And when you're dealing with giving two of them a lesson, or a label, how do you sort of keep it succinct,
Right. No, I would say I like to use the same number of words as the kid is old. So like if you have an 8-year-old, you want to try and give them 8 words. So it might not really look like a complete sentence. And if you have a 5-year-old, then 4 or 5 words. You want to keep it really, really short. And then see what they have to say after that. You want to do less talking, and say, okay, so how are we going to solve this problem?
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Anybody else have a question? Thank you so much for joining us live today. Our next talk is going to be about reading disorders, specifically dyslexia. And that is on, I think, April 29th, which is somehow still in spring break for public schools because their spring break is endless this year. So you will get an invitation for that. You will also get the recording from today and some handouts. And if you have other questions that you think of, don't hesitate to shoot us an email, and we're happy to troubleshoot with you. Right? Thank you so much.
For joining us, and thank you for the
Thank
thoughtful
you.
questions.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.